Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sports with Frank podcast. In our NBA episode today we're going to be covering the news that's coming from the United States with the possibility of the season to restart in Orlando at the Disney World Park that allows them to play several games at the same time. So we're going to be talking about that. And then the idea of the playoffs being changed, the format moving from Western Conference and Eastern Conference to basically the top 16 teams for records, regardless of conference, all playing against each other and then going towards the finals. So basically just disregarding the position in the conference and focusing more on the record, which is something that's been talked about for quite some times, and it's an option going forward for the NBA for this current season, and we'll see for the seasons to come. So let's dive into right now. This is the Sports with Frank podcast. I'm Francesco. Let's do this. Here we go, another week of NBA news. Over the past week or so, there's been coming of reports that are suggesting that the NBA season could restart sooner than we think. The talks are going on right now, and the most likely date seems to be beginning of July. Now, the NBA has been talking about different possibilities, as reported by Woj from Yahoo Sport. The main idea as of right now seems to be the NBA moving all their teams to Orlando to play within the Disney World Park. Now we know that this park has an amount of courts that allows them to play 13 games at the same time and practices as well if needed. So that would be a great option for them to basically contain everybody in this environment, reducing as much as possible the chances of players getting infected, therefore allowing the season to complete, and also limiting traveling by air, which is one of the most dangerous forms of traveling right now, because you're in a plane, closed environment, the chance of getting virus increases by several folds. So by doing so, having everybody in Orlando getting tested at the moment of arrival and getting tested regularly, the NBA would be able to complete its regular season and the playoffs. However, it seems to be uncertain whether the regular season would be finished. So the main option right now seems to be to start the playoffs right away in July, and doing so by having 16 teams from both conferences. So regardless of the conference, it's not going to be 1 through 8 in the West playing against each other and 1 through 8 in the East playing against each other, but it's going to be the top 16 teams by record. So the bracket will be completely different than what expected, and this is an idea that's been going on for a while to reward better teams instead of rewarding teams that play in weaker conferences, because for years the Eastern Conference has been considered the lesser conference, especially during the time of LeBron James. And around the NBA there was this idea of changing the playoff format, and now this seems to be a concrete idea right now for the post-COVID-19 NBA going forward. So what I'm gonna do now, I want to walk you through the first half of the matchups that will happen today if the playoffs were to start today, based on this new format. We're gonna analyze game by game, and I'm gonna give you a prediction of what I think the first round could look like. So let's get into it. So the first matchup, 1 against number 16, and that will be the Bucks against the Orlando Magic. Now the Magic have been rebuilding over the past few years, and since Steve Clifford arrived from Charlotte last season, they've been doing pretty well, considering that the position they were before that arrival. Of course, they picked number 4 in the 2018 NBA draft, and they've been doing well after that because they made the playoffs last year, out in the first round, but nonetheless they managed to get back there, and this season they showed signs of improvement. Now this is a team that it's building around its big man. So Vucevic, all-star, is the main guy in this team. He's been playing to an all-star level, and he's been doing fairly well, even compared to other big men in the league. And then you have Aaron Gordon, who is regressing, to be honest, compared to what I thought the guy would be at this point after several years in the league. I think he's been regressing. It seems like he's more focused on getting D-Wade to give him that 10 in the dunk contest rather than play well for his team. But nonetheless, is a young piece that seems to be focal for this Orlando team moving forward. And of course, they brought in Markelle Fultz over the summer in a trade with the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, Markelle Fultz has been considered a bust for several years. Of course, he came in the 2017 NBA draft, same year as Lonzo Ball and Jason Tatum. Sixers moved up to pick him at first, traded number 3 to the Celtics. They eventually picked Jason Tatum, that so far seems to be the best of these 3 players. However, Markelle Fultz has been, coming back strong this season. Good resurgence for him, and he's been starting the season as a bench player, but is moving towards a spot in the starting 5 for the Orlando Magic. That have this very nice core of veteran players, as I talked about Vucevic already, and then of course they have Fournier, the Frencher, that has been very solid for them. He's a scorer. He's not a transcendent player, but he's been doing well for them. And you mix that with Aaron Gordon and Markelle Fultz. They have Bamba, that for now is considered a bust. Number 4 or 5 pick, I'm not sure, in the 2018 draft. He was supposed to come in and be this new center for Orlando, a team that knows a thing or two about centers, considering that they were the team Shaquille O'Neal, or the team who drafted Dwight Howard. So he came in with high expectations, and he hasn't really paid off yet. But nonetheless, he's a young player, so we can see an improvement for him in the coming years. Nonetheless, it's a good team. However, they're gonna be squaring off in this prediction against the Bucks. The Bucks are the best team in the NBA record-wise, and even the way they play, I think they are the best team in the NBA. Now, this is mostly due to the fact that in their teams you find the presence of Giannis Antetokounmpo, reigning MVP. In my predictions last week, I predicted he's going to be the MVP again for a few years in the future, and this team is playing amazing. Every piece is complementary to each other. Bledsoe, Middleton, Brook Lopez, Robin Lopez out the bench, DiVincenzo also emerging as an important rotational piece. So overall, I don't think there is much of a question here about who's going to win this matchup between the Bucks and Magic. However, I think the Magic have a chance to pull out one game, so I don't predict a sweep here. A gentleman's sweep is probably what's going to happen. So my prediction is that the Bucks will win this series 4-1. Moving towards the second series that this predicted bracket provides us with, that would be the Heat against the Thunder. And in this first round is probably the one that among, let's say, top 3 in the series I'm looking forward to the most. This is the matchup between 2 teams that definitely are overachieving compared to what people would think at the beginning of the year. First, you have the Heat. Of course, the Heat brought in Jimmy Butler over the summer with a sign and trade with the Sixers, and he brought to the team exactly what they expected him to do, and that's that tendency and that hunger to compete, to be a focal leader in that locker room for all the young guys that the Heat have, and they've drafted and signed over the years. And he's been doing great for them. He played at all-star level. He wasn't selected, and in my opinion, it was a bit of a snub. But nonetheless, I'm sure a guy like him is going to use this to fuel his performance from now on. So that's definitely one of the best free agency signings in terms of what he brought to the team. And you pair that with a set of young players that includes, of course, Bam Adebayo, and then G League stud Kendrick Nunn. They have Duncan Robinson, also another player that wasn't expected to be as good as he has been. But for a big man, he has incredible shooting range. He has incredible ability to do pick and rolls as well. So it's a great offensive piece for that offense. And of course, you have Eric Spoelstra on the bench, a guy that's been massively underrated over his career. He became a prominent coach in 2012 when he won the NBA championship with D-Wade, LeBron, Bosh, and the Big Three in Miami. He won the year after as well, and he didn't, receive much of the credit for the title because, of course, that was the LeBron, the peak LeBron. A team like that couldn't lose, and the coach wasn't given as much of, a reward in terms of being considered one of the best ones in the game because of the team he had around him. However, he has shown over the years, especially after LeBron left, that he is a very good coach, very capable, and I wouldn't expect any less from a guy that was handpicked by Pat Riley. So, that's the extra factor there that is giving the Heat the ability to compete, even with a team that on paper is not as good as others in the Eastern Conference. Because, if you take out Jimmy Butler, you had Adebayo that's been incredible this year, but he's been so good because of the way the Spurs has been able to coach these guys and young guys and to make them into good players. So I think, they've been doing great, and I think you have to split the merit of this between players and coaches. And of course, they brought in Iguodala at the trade deadline with a trade with the Grizzlies, and that's also another player that he cannot give you half an hour of incredible defense anymore, but he can definitely give you like those 15-20 minutes in the playoffs that are going to be so important for a young team like the Heat. On the other hand, you have another incredible story this season, the OKC Thunder. Now, the OKC Thunder started the season, and most of the experts consider them to be a lottery team for sure, and a high lottery team nonetheless. However, this team has impressed everyone. So, just to refresh your mind, they traded away Russell Westbrook, the player that everybody associates with the Thunder, over their existence, even more than Kevin Durant. They traded away Paul George, a guy that was brought in to replace KD a year after KD left. And, with Westbrook, they were the two top stars that were going to take OKC, back to the conference finals and back to the finals. That didn't work out, and there were a lot of people that blamed that on Billy Donovan. However, this season showed exactly why that wasn't a Billy Donovan's fault. So this team traded away those two top stars and brought in Chris Paul, a guy that many consider to be at the end of his career, a good player still, because we're talking about one of the best point guards in the game, but at an age now where he wasn't going to contribute to a championship team anymore. They brought in another veteran, Gallinari, which has had very good seasons in the NBA. So overall, that's definitely a good player to have in your roster, especially if your roster is so complementary to each other. And they added to the mix of veterans, including Steven Adams, that was already on the team. They added SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a guy that's showing people much more than what it was expected from him back when he was drafted 2 years ago. So here's a guy, point out of Kentucky. He goes to the Clippers, and he had a role there to play in the team, but he wasn't given the ball, and he wasn't considered to be one of the main guys in their game plan. And maybe, just maybe, they made a mistake to trade him for Paul George. We'll see, because Paul George has been very injured lately, and we'll see who won that trade between the Clippers and the Thunder. But SGA has shown incredible signs of being probably a top star in this league at some point in his career. So you mix that together, veterans, young player, Steven Adams, a guy that knows the environment there, knows the team, and what it came out was an incredible mix of fun basketball. I've talked about this before. The Thunder are my favorite team to watch if I just want to watch a fun game. And, they've been doing great. Record-wise, nobody would predict them to be, at this point in the season, so high up the standings. Right now, they would be the 9th team in the NBA. And this is a team that nobody believed in going into the season. So this matchup would be, one of the most fun to watch, because both of those teams have a lot to offer, and I think it's a very balanced one. And we go back to what I talked about at the beginning, this new format being something that the NBA has thought about for a long time. The reason why that's the case is because this way of creating a bracket for the playoffs provides much more entertainment right away. For many years, the first round of the playoffs, you always have number 1 against number 8. Not great. And, then even going down, even the 4 and 5 is probably the only, fourth seed against 5 seed is probably the only, balanced matchup you have there. With this new format, there's going to be a lot of this. And Heat Thunder could be one of the series that first round, they're going to be, incredible games, defensive as well, because both teams are very good defensively. And in my opinion, this would be a best of 7 for sure. So I can see the Heat pulling out of this one with a 4-3 win over the Thunder, just because I think in key spots the Heat have something more. Chris Paul has been doing great and all, but Jimmy Butler has that edge, between the two stars. In my opinion, right now, Jimmy Butler could be the guy who wins you a playoff series. I think Chris Paul, if handled well in game played over 7 games, could be stopped in a sense. And if I have to take between Bam Adebayo and Steven Adams, I would go with Bam right now. So for this series, I'm saying Miami Heat 4, OKC Thunder 3. Miami move forward to the next round. Now moving forward to one of the less interesting series instead of this bracket, and that's number 2 seed Los Angeles Lakers against number 15 seed Brooklyn Nets. Now, here's the thing with the Nets. They had a plan in place. Last year they played great. D'Angelo Russell was an all-star level player, and they had this bunch of scrappy players, Harris, Dinwiddie. They had Allen Sanders coming up, and in my opinion, it's going to be very good. And we'll see if he actually has a spot in the lineup there, because DeAndre Jordan this season seems to be taking that away. Nonetheless, last year they had a great and fun team, and the coach Kenny Atkinson was doing amazing in my opinion for a team that they jeopardized their future back when they traded Garnett and Pierce, and they gave a lot of draft picks to the Celtics that over the year used them right or not for certain players, and eventually landed them Jason Tatum, for instance. And they put everything on the line for these two aging players that didn't pay off at all, and they haven't been relevant for a long time. But last year, for the first time in a while, they managed to make the playoffs, and they were playing very, fairly nice basketball to watch. This season, they decided, instead of keep building up, they went all out again. This time, though, they went for 2 players that are probably still at the top of their level, contrary to what Garnett and Pierce were back in the days. And they signed Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant in free agency. That cost them D'Angelo Russell, that of course was signed by the Warriors, is now being traded to the Timberwolves, but they lost D'Angelo Russell. And they brought in 2 stars that ideally would increase the chance of your team to be competitive, especially when you bring in someone like Kevin Durant. Now, Durant came in, he was injured, and it seems like even if the playoffs come, if the season restarts, he's not going to be playing for this coming season. If he is coming back, he's going to come back in the 2020-21 season. Same goes for Kyrie. He had surgery. He's probably not going to be coming back. So now you have this team that will go into the playoffs with, a bunch of players very similar to what they had last year, minus the D'Angelo Russell, but most of all, minus the Kenny Atkinson. I promise you, I have no idea why they fired Kenny Atkinson. The reports were saying that the reason why this happened is because the management believed that he wasn't a good coach to coach champions, caliber players like Kyrie and Durant. I'm not surprised with Kyrie, because Kyrie is a difficult player to coach, and over the years he's developed this idea that he is the alpha man in the locker room, and I think he's taken too many chances at being the leader to actually make anyone believe that he is. At the Celtics, he tried to do so, and the Celtics played much better when he wasn't on the court. When he came back to the team, he was more of a disruptor than anything else, and it seems that he's doing the same with the Nets. Now the Nets are gonna get a new coach next year, but they will go into this matchup probably, with no chance whatsoever to pass the Lakers, that on the other hand are showing the NBA that you can have 2 incredible good players like LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and you can just put around them a group of players that are basically 3-and-D players. So players that can just defend every position and shoot threes. That's all you need if you have 2 players like that. And I think over the years that's the concept that's been looked over a bit, because if you look at the incredible winning teams that the Warriors had, they were all good players there. The starting 5 was amazing. So nobody actually remembers that in the NBA, you play with 5 players. If you have 2 players of that caliber, you're going to be able to win. And the Lakers are proving that right now, even without a great coach, because I don't think Frank Vogel is a good coach. I think, very much to what people thought about Spurs back in the days in Miami, I think Vogel is just doing good because of the talent he has on the team with AD and LeBron James. And the rest of the team is pretty good. because at the end of the day, you have Rondo, which has won championship, is a veteran that can give you that 10-15 minutes a night. You have Avery Bradley, incredible defender. You have Caruso that nobody expected him to be so good, and he is being good. They brought in Dion Waiters lately, so we'll see if he can give anything to this team. So overall, it's a well structured team, and I think it's very functional to what they want to do. And in this series, it's a 4-0 sweep for sure. I don't see the Nets pulling out any sort of magic. They don't have the talent, they don't have the players, and in my opinion, the Lakers will have a very easy way through this series. Now let's get into the last one for this episode, and we're going to talk about the next four matchups in next week's episode, but we're going to finish with this one for today, and that's the Jazz, number 7 seed, against the Rockets, number 10 seed. Now this is another one of those super interesting matchups, because the Jazz, for the way they play, are probably kryptonite for the Rockets. The Rockets made a decision at the trade deadline. Mike D'Antoni is in the last year of his deal. He's not going to re-sign with the Houston Rockets. So he's decided, in accordance with Daryl Morey, the GM, to basically go all out and try and play this style of basketball that he has envisioned. D'Antoni is the guy that came, he started to be considered a guru in the NBA back in Phoenix when he had, that team with Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire, and that was the 7 seconds or less team, right? Where they would take the ball and within 7 seconds they would get a shot up, a lot of threes. But back in the days, this wasn't as effective as it is now. The 3-ball wasn't as used by teams, so that was revolutionary, but it didn't give Phoenix a title in the end, especially because during those years they were competing against the Lakers of Kobe, Gasol in the West, the San Antonio Spurs, and all these incredible teams. So overall, they didn't manage to bring home a title, even though Steve Nash won 2 MVPs for this incredible game that D'Antoni was kind of trying to put forward. And he's trying that again here. Now, he doesn't have Steve Nash anymore, but he has James Harden, which is a very similar player in the sense that he's very good at handling the ball and, making passes like Nash was, and of course, great at three-pointers. But the other star in this team is not Amari Stoudemire anymore, but it's Russell Westbrook. Now, Russell Westbrook is a player that requires the paint to be empty for him to be at his best. And with Capella there, that wasn't the case. Capella, of course, is a big center. He's gonna be sticking around the paint, underneath the basket, get rebounds, and it wasn't compatible with Westbrook's style of play. So what did they decide to do? They traded away Capella. They brought in Covington, and now they basically play with no center. PJ Tucker is their center, and they take a chance here. They say, we're gonna beat you with a 3-pointer. We're not gonna, get rebounds underneath our basket or your basket. We're gonna be losing this rebounding battle, but when we have the ball, we're gonna score 3. So the idea they go into a game with is either we're gonna win by 40 or we're gonna lose by 40. There is no middle ground there. It's either blowout or you get blown out. And the Jazz are literally the perfect team to stop the Rockets' game plan, because they have a guy in Rudy Gobert that it's an old style of center if you look at him, because it's not the Karl Anthony Towns style center, it's not the Anthony Davis style center. He's a guy that's gonna be staying underneath the basket. Defensively, he's gonna dominate your rebounds, and offensively, a lot of pick and rolls, a lot of alley-oops, but he's not gonna beat you from the 3-point line. So he's always gonna be in the paint. And for a team like the Rockets, that's kryptonite, because that's going to prevent them from being able to, even get those. At the end of the day, they need to get rebounds. And if they play against a certain type of center, they have a chance. Against Gobert, I don't think that the Rockets have anybody in the roster that can actually, compete with Gobert to get a rebound. So that's definitely something that would be interesting to see in this series. And then we have the Jazz as an overall team that I was very high on at the beginning of the season. I thought they were going to be competing for the first spot in the Western Conference. I didn't predict the Lakers to be this good. I thought the Clippers and the Jazz would compete for the first seed in the West. This has not been the case. In this new bracket, they're number 7. But I think this is more to do with injuries. So this is a team that traded away Ricky Rubio in the summer. No, sorry, he was a free agent, so he just left. They traded for Mike Conley from the Grizzlies. Now, Mike Conley is a very good player. Even if he's getting older, he's a good player. And in a system like this, where he doesn't have to be the main star, is a very good option for a team like the Jazz, because he's very good defensively, and also he's a guy that can get a bucket. He's not going to be the main star in this system, because you have Donovan Mitchell, and for what they asked him to do, I think he would have been a great fit for them. Now, he got injured very early in the season, and he hasn't played much. He was actually moved to the bench when he came back. But this is a team that, they brought in a lot of firepower. They brought in Bogdanovic from Indiana, and they had a lot of firepower in their starting five, but even bench-wise, now they even brought in Clarkson from Cleveland, traded for Dante Exum, another guy that can come in for like 20 minutes a game and give you those 10, 12 points, 6 or 7 assists. So I think, the Jazz could actually be a surprise in these playoffs, because I think they haven't performed at their top and their peak yet during this season due to the injuries. And now with the complete team, if we do go back to playing, I think they could surprise a lot of people. And I think they could start in this series where I predict a 4-3 win for the Jazz. But this would be very similar to what the Miami Thunder series would be. This would be an incredible tough series to play for both teams, because I believe if you take out the Gobert factor for the Jazz, the rest of the players are completely, one-sided in my opinion, because we took Harden and Westbrook against Conley and Mitchell. Of course, Harden and Westbrook are better, but I think the surrounding, it's much better for the Jets, bench-wise as well. So we'll see how this one goes. As I said, I think it's going to be a best of 7, get to the 7 game, and it's going to be probably my favorite one to watch in this first round. Like, I have the Miami Thunder one if I want to have fun and want to watch fun basketball, and I have this one if I want to watch hard-fought basketball. So 4-3 for the Jazz, and some might think this is a surprise. There could be a surprising result, but in my opinion, it's just, by looking at the style of play, this is just the more logical conclusion to this possible series. Here it is, another episode comes to an end. This was interesting because it's hard to actually make a prediction on whether the NBA will come back or not. There are talks ongoing, but I talked about it last week. There is so many different camps, people that want to play, people that don't want to play, people that want to play, but they have to be certain regulations in place. So it's going to be hard to find a common ground for them. But if they do come back, and this is the playoff schedule we're going to have, this is going to be one of those incredible changes to the NBA that have happened over the years that I think will stick around, because this playoff bracket is actually, I think it can be a lot of fun. So we'll see what happens there. But next week, when I talk to you again about the NBA, it's probably going to be on Wednesday again. I'm trying to rework my schedule, but Wednesday seems to be the best day for this NBA and American sports in general podcast. So I'll probably talk to you about NBA again on Wednesday. And we're going to go over the next 4 games that are in the first round. And then we'll see. I have in mind something about the NFL, but I have to work on it. So we'll see if it comes in next week, or it's going to be in a couple of weeks' time. But don't worry, if there's any NFL fan listening to this, I'll be talking about it as well in no time. But, off-season right now, it's a bit quieter. Not as much to talk about, or not as many news, but nonetheless, the closer we get to the regular season starting in August, the more we're going to be talking about this as well. Nonetheless, thank you for listening. Again, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. 5-star will be much appreciated. And if you want to drop me a follow on Twitter, that's @sportswithfrank. So you can find me there. And then next time you hear from me, it's going to be on Friday. We're going to be talking a bit about those games that happened yesterday in the Bundesliga, and they're going to be happening today as well. And we're going to be previewing the weekend that's coming ahead, and of course a bit of news coming from Italy as well, with the decision on the Serie A restarting that should be happening on Thursday, so we'll talk about it on Friday as well. Until then, this was the Sports with Frank podcast. I've been Francesco. Stay safe,